Hey guys, something went wrong in the last live, so I just canceled that one and went live again. Um, so the question that was asked was on finasteride, and I highly recommend if you're looking into finasteride to do your own research, and I highly recommend to read the book Hair Like a Fox by Danny Roddy. Remember, guys, nothing in this live is medical advice. It's just for education. So, go do your own research. But Hair Like a Fox is a really good summary of DHT blocking like hair loss solutions. A lot of people have experienced like side effects that they didn't know, and so it's just always a good idea to do research on. Okay, let's see. I've been eating FN for a few months now, and I still don't gain any weight. I've been trying to gain weight my whole life. I'm 30 now. Why could this be? I think I'm eating enough, but maybe I'm not. Could it be something else? Thank you. So there's a lot of people who think that hypothyroidism and metabolic issues only look like not being able to lose weight, and having a slow metabolism just means that we're always, you're overweight. But this can actually be only one of the side effects. Some people are actually have a hard time gaining weight when they have thyroid issues and metabolic issues. They have high stress hormones, and so they can't keep weight on because their body's burning through nutrients faster than they can, store up. And so a lot of people that have quote unquote fast metabolisms or can't put on weight are often just as stressed or metabolically compromised as people who have, who are overweight or are having a hard time losing weight. And so we need to approach this in the same way. Now, some people who can't gain weight have other issues. Like, you want to make sure you're exploring the gut component. Are you able to digest and absorb food okay? Some people are not absorbing food. It's going right through them, or they just have digestive issues in general. And so it's important to explore, like, am I absorbing the food? And then also, how are my cells metabolizing the food? Because a poor metabolism can either look like being very underweight or also very overweight. So there's not just one, it doesn't just look like one thing on each person. Hi, I stopped breastfeeding over a year ago and have not had a period, prolactin levels in the 70s. How do I combat this? I highly recommend watching my IGTV episode on breastfeeding if you haven't already. A lot of times high prolactin has to do with stress. Estrogen and prolactin do have a relationship, as well as calcium. And so oftentimes women who are breastfeeding don't realize that if they're not eating enough calcium, their body will actually break down their own bones in order to put calcium in the breast milk. And this is often can sometimes carry over if they weren't getting enough calcium either during pregnancy or during breastfeeding. And then there can be other stress components. So, I would be looking at, like, am I getting the nutrients that I need for my body to balance out? And also, where is my stress levels? And this can be like internal stress and external stress. So I think sometimes you guys get confused when I say stress. We want to evaluate, like, anything that means our body does not have enough of the raw materials it needs to do its job is stress. So if that means, like, it's, a relationship, or a really crappy job, or just not eating enough. I mean, there can be many types of stressors. Thoughts on marine-based collagen? I don't necessarily like. I'm not a big fan of fish bones and stuff like that if we can get it from a cow, but of course, if that's the only thing that you'll eat, it's probably better than no collagen at all. Do you like organic Livia's liver tincture or digestive bitters? Yeah, I think it's a pretty, like, common liver blend. I've had people use that. I really like Urban Moonshines. I also have used Mountain Rose Herbs. I'm a big fan of digestive bitters. I use them, like, I always have them on hand. Very supportive for the digestive tract, just getting digestive enzymes up, and also just helping with digestion overall, gallbladder flow. Started fully nourished and loving it. Yay! Are eggs, meat, dairy my only protein options? I cannot tolerate dairy or eggs at all yet, and thus find myself eating some sort of meat at least 3 times per day. If you can tolerate, like, gelatin and collagen, that would probably be a good option. Some people like need to add like a protein powder, like bone broth protein, and then like just drinking broths, and then white fish and shellfish. So like seafood can be a great option. So I would just try to varietize my protein as much as I possibly could, without like eating things that I'm just very intolerant to, and then working towards being able to digest those foods in the future. Hey, Jess, thanks for being here. Of course. Last week you said you felt hyperthyroidism symptoms as you healed. Can you explain what that felt like? I would get, for me, like that just looked like towards like 1 or 2 p.m. I would get really hot, like turn really red almost. Like I just felt overheated, like almost like I was having a hot flash. And then I would, my heart was kind of like not racing, but I felt like there was points in my day where I couldn't calm down. And I had like just anxiety that I was like, why do I have this? Like, there's nothing to be anxious about. And that was really, that was what I felt. Some people will say they get like a racing heart. Some people will just feel stressed, or their temperatures will be high and they can't, get them down. Another thing for me was my pulses were really, really high. I was hitting like the 120s, 130s, and I was like, that's not normal. And that was that. Hair from PCOS, hair loss, growing back, but not periods. What could be happening? I don't know. Like, what are the, maybe, remember I always talk about like, what are the things preventing us from ovulating? And that, going deeper than that, some people are like, I don't know. And it's like, what is making our body feel not safe enough to reproduce? Sometimes this can be specific nutrients we're not getting in the diet. Sometimes it can be stressors, like external stressors. Sometimes it's just a time thing. You know, if we're starting to see a resolution of some of our symptoms, sometimes we just need to keep going. But we always want to be evaluating, like, if we're eating enough, are we eating enough protein, carb, and fat, like individually? And then we want to make sure we're hitting those really important nutrients like B vitamins, specifically like fat soluble vitamins like vitamin A, K, E. We want to make sure we're getting sun. We want to make sure we're getting sleep. And then we just want to evaluate our stressors. So like life stressors, like relationships, job, friendships, you know, whatever are I guess I almost treat like our lifestyle as categories. Like we usually have our own unique categories in life, whether we have children or a relationship, and we need to look at each of those things individually. Like, are those driving stress? And if they are, what are some things we can do to mitigate the stress or just get rid of the stress altogether? Food to eat high in vitamin K2 other than dairy, well-cooked kale or supplement. So there's 2 types of vitamin K. We have vitamin K1 and vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 is pretty much only found in animal foods and a little bit in something called natto, which is like fermented soybeans. A lot of people don't like eating fermented soybeans. It tastes disgusting. But if you like it, more power to you. Now, vitamin K1 is what's found in greens, and our body can actually make our body can actually synthesize or make vitamin K2 as well. So it just depends on our gut health. But yeah, I mean, dairy is really the best source. Like butter oil is a high source of it. Ghee. I think like duck liver is specifically a high source. And but yeah, the only plant food I can think of is like natto. At least if you're looking for specifically vitamin K2. Is aspirin good for acne? What brand do you like? What are the benefits topically, internally? I wouldn't say like it's bad or good. I'm always looking at like, what is aspirin doing? There's many benefits of aspirin. And if you haven't already read Dr. Pete's articles on aspirin, I would highly recommend just for the summary. There's also some good ones on like functional performance systems. I really like that website. You can just type in their search bar pretty much any topic and you'll find a bunch of resources like backing up any specific topic. But aspirin is obviously an anti-inflammatory. It's derived from salicylic acid, the same types of compounds that are found in like white willow bark, fireweed tea. There's some plant foods out there that are that these salicylates or salicylic acid would be found in. And, you know, traditionally we would have been eating animals that were eating these plants that were rich in salicylic acid, right? These anti-inflammatory. compounds. But now, because most of our animals are farmed, they're not foraging in the wild, they're no longer getting exposed to a variety of these plant foods. I actually learned this in a podcast that Mac Blackburn did with Ben Belty. I really love listening to Ben Belty because he is just like so knowledgeable about plants, but they did a whole episode on fireweed tea. It's a while back, but if you scroll back and look for that episode, it's just very, very enlightening, talking about the beneficial compounds found in white willow bark. And so when people are taking aspirin, they're kind of trying to replicate getting these like anti-inflammatory compounds that would have been found in these, herbs and plants that animals would have been eating at one point in time if they were foraging in the wild. People have stated that aspirin has, many benefits, from being anti-inflammatory to helping with lipid peroxidation to protecting the liver, to being like an aromatase inhibitor, so being anti-estrogen. So a lot of people like it. I personally use Jerry Care aspirin or Health Natura aspirin powder. I like to get like a pure aspirin powder like from Health Natura, but they've been sold out lately, so I've just been using Jerry Care. But Jerry Care can sometimes mess with my stomach, so I like to dissolve it in some warm water when I take it. I'll be honest, I haven't been good about taking it lately, just because, it is a blood thinner. And so, when you're taking other blood thinners that are things that can thin the blood, like vitamin E, or systemic enzymes like proteolytic enzymes can be blood thinners, specifically like serrapeptase or nattokinase. It can be really hard to combat the blood thinning effects and take enough vitamin K. So sometimes I'll pick or choose, because I get the ringing in the ears, which can be a sign that, okay, blood's too thin. So I haven't been taking aspirin lately at all for, I would say like a month or two. And when I do, it's usually a couple times a week, just dissolved in warm water. I'm never really good about taking supplements every day. I'm just not. I think I just spent way too much time taking so many supplements every day that now I'm just like, I take them kind of sporadically. But yeah, a lot of people have seen a lot of benefit with aspirin. They love how it makes them feel. It makes them feel warm and happy. I've personally experienced that. Like I feel nice and warm and kind of like calm when I take it after like a really nourishing, fairly large meal. And so I have seen it really help my like keratosis pilaris that I had on the back of my arm. And then also hair loss was very much helped when I first started taking it. But yeah, it's not like the first thing that I personally would take. It's something that I kind of have played around with later on in my, I guess like my biohacking efforts. But beforehand, I just stuck to the basics, because I don't like to add a lot of stuff like weird compounds in until I've laid my foundations. Because if the foundations aren't working, then those need to be tweaked before we like try to add more things in. I've heard some people say our body can't assimilate collagen and doesn't know how to use it properly, so it isn't effective. Thoughts? I mean, I guess like people could say the same thing for synthetic supplements or other foods, like we could take that argument pretty far. I've never seen evidence of that. I've only seen benefits from like implementing either gelatin or collagen into my diet. And there's many other people that have seen benefits. So, of course, like taking collagen doesn't directly turn into collagen, which I think there's a lot of people who have like miseducated about that and said like taking collagen helps our own collagen. And I personally don't believe that. I take the collagen for the glycine. I take it for the amino acids in there. And I take it for the extra protein. I don't really take it like to replace my own collagen. I'm not really sure where they're getting that from. I just entered my 3rd trimester of pregnancy and I started developing eczema on my face. Any tips? Someone has eczema, I'm always looking at like the liver. I'm always looking at like supporting the body as a whole and metabolism. Like how are those things doing? Because oftentimes that's going to have an impact. Noelle, I think her last name is Noelle Covery. She just did like an amazing story on this a couple of, I want to say like a week ago. She probably has a story highlight on it. I highly recommend going and watching that on her page. Last week you said only to use progesterone after ovulation. How about pregnenolone? I'm using Forever Health Hair's Lush and I love it, but I don't want to mess with my cycle. I personally don't stress about a minimal amount of progesterone or pregnenolone on my skin. If I'm taking it as a supplement, that's very different than me putting like a drop or two on my face. I use Lush all cycle long and I don't have any problems with it. I would say the pregnenolone is probably minimal enough to where it's not really affecting hormones too much. Hi, Jess. You've said that beet juice is great for gallbladder issues. How do you recommend drinking it on empty stomach? Should we pair it with a protein? Thanks. I think like whatever works for you. Usually if I'm doing like some type of tincture or elixir that I'm trying to maybe like achieve a purpose, I guess I could say, is I usually drink it alone first to see how I do, because it's usually going to be more effective if it's hitting an empty system. But it can be integrated into just about anything. I mean, I would probably use it in my as my carbohydrate for maybe 1 or 2 meals a day. If we supplement vitamin E, do you recommend vitamin K as well? I also read online that vitamin K needs to be taken with vitamin D because of calcium problems in the bones or something. I personally don't take vitamin D. I don't think it's a really great supplement to take. If you haven't like looked into the research of Morley Robbins, I highly recommend. It's a hormone and it's not a vitamin, so it can really cause some problems. But yeah, if we take too much vitamin K, it can lower calcium a lot. That's why we want to make sure we're getting plenty of calcium in our diet. This is why I don't like when people cut out dairy, because it's very difficult to get enough calcium if we're not eating dairy. And calcium is so important for metabolic function. So this is why, like, if people aren't doing dairy, I highly, highly, highly suggest looking into eggshell calcium or pearl powder or something along those lines to make sure people are getting enough calcium. If we overdo it on vitamin K, it can cause all types of problems just with any singular supplement. I personally take a small amount of vitamin K and don't worry about it. And I personally take, a small amount of vitamin E and don't worry about it. But that's in context with a whole diet. If I was trying to out supplement a bad diet, or I was like mega dosing supplements, yeah, I would be super stressed about that stuff. But I'm not a mega doser of anything, and I rely very heavily on food and use supplements as kind of like, I guess, like an insurance plan almost. Haagen-Dazs ice cream has a small amount of trans fat in it. Is this still okay? Yes. I mean, where would it be coming from? I am looking at ingredients. I don't look at the like ingredient label, like numbers. My body's not like, oh my gosh, 1 gram of this. Like, oh no, it just cares about ingredients. So when I'm looking at food, I'm looking at the ingredients. Like, what is this food made of? Thank you. Pro-metabolic 5 months, developed a rash between shoulders 1.5 months ago. It will not go away. Suggestions. Some people really need to focus in on their liver and focus on their gut, being very consistent with the raw carrot salad. If you're in Fully Nourished, like the detox lemonade can be helpful. So can the liquid multi, which has nettle in it, which can be very supportive of detoxification. We really want to be supporting detox. And then we also want to be like hyper focused on minerals. Magnesium, potassium specifically are often not getting enough, people aren't paying enough attention to them. And they are important for detoxification. So whenever there's like rashes, I'm always looking at the liver and the gut. Just because that's usually, remember that, the skin is a detox organ, the liver is a detox organ, the gut's a detox organ. And so if something's coming out of the skin, it's having a hard time getting out of other places. And we really want to open up as much of our detox pathways as we can. Left Instagram, please post to blog email. Yeah, I'm sending an email once a week to kind of summarize everything. And I will be like uploading my IGTV episodes and my stories slowly to YouTube. So hang in there. Hi, Jess. What are your thoughts on reintroducing dairy after 7 months without during pregnancy? I think this is just like a personal thing. I personally would want the nutrients as much as I could if I could tolerate it. Many women can tolerate dairy very well during pregnancy. That's usually the time where they can tolerate it if they can't tolerate it in other situations. So a lot of women like to implement it slowly, you know, a sip of milk, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a couple of weeks, and then adding in maybe some easier to digest cheeses, like slowly implementing things. I think it's just your personal choice. Goat cheese and goat's milk tends to be the easiest to digest. And also like soft cheeses like ricotta, mascarpone, like those types of things. So I'd probably start with either milk or easy to digest cheeses and kind of go from there. Like Parmesan is also very easy to digest. Hi, new here. Best type of chlorophyll to look out for, should it be derived from something specific? I personally like World Organic Chlorophyll. That's the one that I use. I've literally used so many brands, and that one is just like the most mild, most neutral, and seems for me to be the most effective. A lot of other brands have weird additives in them and honestly just taste weird. So that's what I prefer. Will amenorrhea delay menopause? I'm not really sure about that question. I mean, I'm thinking about it now. I don't see why it would. I mean, if their theory that menopause is a woman running out of eggs, then I mean, in theory, it probably would, but we know that that's probably a big bag of baloney. So that, you know, I guess that's up for debate, but I'm really not sure. I haven't heard anything on that. What are your thoughts on the Thyroid Plus by Forever Healthy Hair? Noelle K. Looking to add some extra thyroid support in the third trimester. Thanks. Yeah, I think it just has like oyster extract, niacinamide, just like all the kind of like nutrients. People have asked me about that supplement before. Sometimes with blends, it can be hard to get enough of each thing into a blend to fit into capsules. So sometimes there's less of the amount of something that you need to get to where you want to go in a supplement. But if you're looking for like an easy blend that has, you know, like oyster powder, I think it has like beef liver in it. Don't quote me on that. Like pearl powder, ashwagandha, like it has some mixes of things in there. It's probably a good option. But I would double check, especially if you're on medications. Like not everyone can do ashwagandha. Toothbrush recommendations. I just use like an electric toothbrush. I don't really, I've gotten like bamboo toothbrushes before, or like natural fiber toothbrushes, but like they just like don't do the trick for me. So I just like an easy option. Why is that gastroenterologist can't tell when you have gut issues like SIBO, Candida, etc.? Because they're not trained to do that. They're trained to just diagnose and then treat with a medication. They're not trying to prevent issues for us. Well, at least most aren't. And so they're not trained to look for the root causes of things. Just started Kate's metabolism book. Is there anything you would disagree with? I know there's a lot of differing opinions in the nutrition space, and I'm curious about your take on it. Yeah, I really like her book. I find that it's a little overwhelming, especially like the food portion of it, like her emphasis on doing like very little muscle meats and lots and lots of dairy. Like I think that some people that can work really well for, but for a majority of people, they can't do a lot of dairy at first. Sometimes people can't do any dairy. And so that can be really stressful if you're being told like you can't have any muscle meat and you should do a lot of dairy and you're not digesting it well. It can be kind of like stressful. So I love that book. I think it's like pretty much the Bible, but just remember that those can be, all the principles in there can sometimes take years to implement. It's not like something you're going to be able to implement overnight. Would you eat raw egg whites? Yeah, I eat raw eggs all the time, but I prefer only eating raw egg yolks. Like I don't like the texture of raw egg whites, but I'll like throw it in a smoothie or whatever. Also, any other books you would recommend? Yeah, on my website, I have like a whole tab of resources, and one of the sections on that page has a lot of my foundational books that I really like. When you are counting macros, do you have to literally measure food? You don't really have to measure food. It just depends. But a lot of people don't know what 5 ounces of chicken is. So it can be very helpful to just like and what I do is I have my food scale. I put my plate on my food scale and zero it out. And then when I add something to my plate, I'm just adding it and I'm looking and I'm like, oh, that's what 5 ounces of chicken looks like. Awesome. And then you zero it out and then you add your 4 ounces of potatoes. And they're like, oh, that's what 4 ounces of potatoes looks like. Is it necessary? Not always, but for some people who are trying to achieve a specific goal and are whining about, oh my gosh, I can't lose weight or I can't do this. And then you're like, oh my gosh, every time I ate potatoes, I was actually eating 8 ounces of potatoes instead of 5 ounces of potatoes. So it's kind of one of those things where it can be helpful, especially if you have just no idea how much protein is in your food, how many carbohydrates are in your food. Like I've never consistently counted macros. I probably counted them for like 3 or 4 weeks and then take a break, 3 or 4 weeks, take a break. And I can now eyeball what 5 ounces of chicken looks like or 6 ounces of potatoes looks like. Like it's not something that I like have to stress about. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, down to the number. I just can eyeball it now. But no, I don't think people need to measure their food, like put it in measuring cups. What to look for, avoid when choosing a shilajit supplement, recommended brands. I personally just use Himalayan shilajit. I really like them. I've seen a lot of success with that brand, and it's fairly inexpensive. But yeah, you just kind of want to look for like you want them to have a certificate, like a testing certificate, that they're getting it from a legitimate source. And everyone's a little different. So if you try something and you don't see that it's working for you, then try something else. But I really like Himalayan shilajit, and I've used it for over like a year and a half now. 5 months in, TMI alert, I spot brown blood for 3 days, then full flow, painful and nauseated 8 to 10 days total, eat every 3 to 4 hours, raw carrot and liver. What am I missing? Some people just have thyroid issues. Like sometimes that's something that we want to get checked out, especially if estrogen dominant symptoms are not getting better. And then iron overload is another thing that we want to explore. Like Dr. William Shute in his book, like I love his vitamin E book, he talks about how like iron overload, having too much iron in the body, estrogen dominance, and hypothyroidism just kind of like feed into each other. They're like this vicious circle that just go round and round and round. So if we have iron overload, that's going to make estrogen dominance worse. If we have estrogen dominance, that's going to make hypothyroidism worse. And then hypothyroidism is going to make us store more iron. And so it's like just this weird vicious cycle. And they all kind of play into each other. And so when people have one, they usually have all three. And when we're specifically struggling with the symptoms of one, oftentimes we're struggling. There's a reason. It's because we're struggling with multiple different things that are kind of feeding into each other. So I would definitely do more research on like hypothyroidism. I would definitely do more research on estrogen dominance and definitely do more research on iron overload. How soon after eating liver should you drink black tea to block iron but not interfere with stomach acid? Are there any other benefits to black tea? That's like a really stressful question. Like I feel like that's a very stressful mindset to come from. I mean, I just sip coffee or black tea with a meal. That's what I do. When I'm eating something that contains iron, that's what I usually do. There's not like a time frame. I'm not like, oh my gosh, 5 minutes like has passed. I'll just do it. If I forget at a meal, I'll just consume it right afterwards. Like I really encourage you guys to not overthink food and to make it so clinical to where there's just no enjoyment. And you're like, oh my gosh, I got to get my black tea in because I don't want to absorb my iron. And it's just going to get really stressful. So I just highly recommend try to integrate habits and routines over rules. So yeah, like just brew some tea when you go to eat your dinner. It's just like one of those things where we're creating a routine. But yeah, I don't really like black tea that much just because of the tannins. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but I don't think it's like a great benefit. I just tried to get blood and they said my iron is too low. I had my period 14 days ago. What do you think that caused that? I think I eat healthy. Ferritin is usually what they test, and unfortunately, they don't get the picture with ferritin. So remember that ferritin is not a measure for iron. I mean, sometimes they'll test hemoglobin as well, and that usually requires copper. So oftentimes we need to really focus in on copper and whole foods vitamin C. Thank you as always for the time. If our luteal stage is short, would you look at supplementing progesterone or pregnenolone? I remember you mentioned you were taking pregnenolone. It just depends on like where you're coming from. Like if you're doing all of the other things, like your foundations are good, then that would be a time to like maybe consider looking into it, and if it's appropriate for you. But I think it's important to cover foundations first. So like eating enough, getting enough protein, carb, and fat, getting your meal timing down like every 3 to 4 hours, and being really consistent about it, being good about your minerals, being good about your nutrients, like your fat soluble vitamins, vitamin C, and then like sleep, sun, movement, like are those things that are good to go. And then if people are really stressed out and they can't lower their stress for whatever reason, that's sometimes when progesterone can be a really nice tool to use. But yeah, I think like for me, it's kind of one of those things where you just have to look at the context of your situation. And then for some women they'll always ask me like, is it right or is it wrong? And sometimes I'm just like, sometimes we just need to figure it out for ourselves. Like if it's good for us. I know a lot of women who have tried it and said like it didn't work for them. And a lot of women who tried it and were like, oh, this was perfect. So sometimes it just comes down to trying it. But we really want to make sure the foundations are laid first. Is it true you can test hormones via blood test at any point if you have an irregular cycle? Yes. I mean, I would, if you're still ovulating at some points, I would probably try to nail after ovulation to see where I'm at. But yeah, if we're not having an ovulation at all and we're having like a really irregular cycle, then sometimes we just need to test whenever, because we know progesterone's going to be low. So it's kind of like we want to see where other hormones are at. I just started FN and was wondering if it is safe for someone like me with high cholesterol, given that it relies heavily on carbs, which I heard from Dr. Hyman make LDL go up. Thank you. I highly recommend looking into the cholesterol's connection with hypothyroidism. Like Dr. Broda Barnes talked about how that was like one of the older diagnoses that they use, because it takes thyroid hormone to convert cholesterol into things like vitamin D, and to convert cholesterol into steroid hormones, and to convert cholesterol into all hormones. So cholesterol is the building blocks of our hormones, and it tends to be actually very protective. So I highly recommend, like I've done a few posts on this. Loren De La Cruz at Innate Functional Nutrition has done a few posts on this. I know Dr. Ray Peat has a few articles on this. You can go to Functional Performance Systems in their blog and type in the search bar cholesterol, so you can look at that more. But I highly, highly recommend digging a little deeper on cholesterol, because the story is a little bit cloudy out there. I have a client whose metabolism is in the toilet, working on it, but she wakes up about 5 to 6 times in the night to go to the bathroom. How do we slow down how much she urinates? She's losing minerals. Thank you. Yeah, she's definitely losing minerals. When you're peeing a bunch, you are losing minerals. But remember, why are we peeing a lot? Because adrenaline is high. And we have to ask ourselves, why is adrenaline high? What are the factors driving adrenaline to be high? Is she drinking, or is she having a really high quality bedtime snack to keep her blood sugar balanced right before she goes to bed? Is she doing too many carbohydrates, and does she need more fats? That can sometimes help keep blood sugar balanced. Usually adrenaline's high because either there's a stressful situation going on. So what are her environmental stressors? Like, is there a Wi-Fi router right near her bed? Or is she being exposed to a ton of blue light in her room? Does she need to like really darken the room and sleep under a red lamp? Is there, how are minerals? Like how's magnesium? How's potassium? Are those things being implemented? Are those things being focused on? Because the lower that they are, oftentimes the higher the stress. How about salt and sodium? Like that's another important, like usually the adrenals are the ones that are being overactive. So where's the stress? And that's really where like it boils down to, because during the night, our body's completely reliant upon the liver to keep blood sugar balanced. And so if our liver can't really store up sugar very well, then that's really why we're waking up. Our body's actually trying to tell us to eat. And so usually with clients who are waking up multiple times a night, I have them do a really good bedtime snack, and then usually a midnight snack, to get their stress hormones down. And that can help, and when that starts to improve, it's usually going to look like she's going from peeing 6 times a night to 4 times a night to 2 times a night. Like it's going to take time to see like overall large improvements, but it's all about that liver. and getting it to store up enough carbohydrate and fuel during the day, so when she's sleeping at night, she can sleep. Do you think a probiotic could be helpful when addressing eczema in a baby? Any kind you recommend? Wondering if could open up a Digestive capsule and pour on her bottle. I don't know how old she is. I think Digestive has an age limit, so you might just want to check on the bottle. But yeah, some people decide to use probiotics to address it, trying to figure out what's going on. And sometimes it takes some like a process of elimination. Hello, I have headaches, vomiting, FLU symptoms the day before period, no cramps or anything. What causes this and what helps ease it? For a lot of women, it's histamine. For some women, it's inflammation. But it usually takes, we want to remember that our period is kind of our report card for how our whole month of health is. So a lot of women see their period as like this separate entity, and they're like, oh, my period's awful. But they're not realizing that their health as a whole is actually struggling, and their body's really screaming about it during their period. And so throughout our whole cycle, we really want to be focused on balancing our blood sugar, getting the right types of nutrients, the right types of minerals, eating plenty of calories, eating plenty of protein, carbs, and fat, and working on things that are going to help lower stress, which therefore will lower inflammation. And then if that's not helping, then diving deeper into why we're possibly estrogen dominant, or like, are we progesterone deficient? You might find a lot of information and helpful in my mini course, Mend Your Cycle. I talk kind of about a little bit more about just the cycle and cycle health overall. What's the best way to start exercising if you're working on healing your gut? Thank you for your time and information. I think like the best way is just to start slowly. So a lot of people just like dive in, they're just going crazy, and it can just increase gut symptoms. I think that things that are going to help with lymphatic drainage, like walking, rebounding, like on a mini trampoline, vibration plates can be very, very helpful because they're not super intensive, but they can really help the lymphatic system kind of move and drain. I like weight training. We just have to kind of find our tolerance and our limit for it. And then usually like really excessive cardio or really excessive like HIIT training and stuff like that usually will just increase endotoxin symptoms, increase our symptoms of like high serotonin, just issues with the gut in general. And so we kind of just need to nose around and figure out what's the best for us. But usually like going slow and just starting slow and working up is probably the best. And I truly think that trigger pointing and trigger point therapy is probably the most positive thing that people with gut health issues can do, because oftentimes there's so much bunched up fascia and just so much toxic junk that's sitting there, because when we have gut issues, we're oftentimes in pain, even if it's just subconsciously. And so we're really like holding a lot of tension in our gut. And so when we start to actually trigger point and work out the tension in the gut, that often leads to a lot of like endotoxin release. It can lead to a lot of toxin release and really help our blood flow to the colon come back. And so helping with peristalsis and muscle movement and detoxification of the lymphatic system. There's a lot of benefits to trigger pointing for gut issues. Are you familiar with niacinamide powder from Health Natura? It looks like it is just pure niacinamide powder. What are the benefits of taking the powder? Was also thinking of using it topically. I'm not familiar with it, but usually niacinamide powder is niacinamide powder. Niacinamide or vitamin B3 is beneficial for all different types of things. Usually people are promote it as like a very helpful tool for mitochondrial health, increasing ATP through NAD synthesis. It can be helpful for like lipid peroxidation, and some people say it helps protect from polyunsaturated fats. It's a very important B vitamin, and it can really help our cells use sugar better. So yeah, some people see a lot of benefit from it, and I think it can be a very helpful tool for a lot of people. Definitely can help speed up the metabolism for some people. Been following this way of eating for 10 months or so, carrots every day, etc. PMS is still so bad. Would Progestive be a good addition, or any other ideas? Thanks. For some people, yes. Sometimes we have to like really work on prostaglandins and PMS. Like what type of PMS? Like, is it mood? Is it headaches? Like, I would be looking at what types. Oftentimes, like, if it's for days and days and days, that usually is pointing to like estrogen dominance. If it's just like the day before, then sometimes it's like, a little bit more mild, like we need blood sugar support and mineral support. If it's during, like our period is actually a problem, then yes, usually it's like estrogen dominance. We still need to focus on minerals. And so, yeah, sometimes people only see improvement when they add progesterone in, if nothing else is helping with that. But it's hard to say if that's like appropriate for you. At least for me to say that. Do you have a post on castor oil packs and how to do them properly? I don't know, but you could definitely Google it. Like, it's not like rocket science. It's literally like soak a piece of wool in castor oil, lay it over your liver, put heat on it if you want, and sit there for 40 minutes. Like, it's really not super difficult. It's messy, that's for sure, but it's not difficult. Hi, what do you use for facial cleanser and how often? What about exfoliator? I do not exfoliate my skin. I'm not like someone that needs to like scrub my skin. I use like a gentle sea sponge that I get on Etsy, just like a natural sea sponge that they like cut from the sea. And then I use Forever Healthy Hair's clear cleanser. I really like that cleanser. It's really amazing. And then I also really like using Cosma Beauty's pre-cleanse. She has like a pre-cleanse oil cleansing oil, and I'll usually alternate. Like, I'll do clear either in the evening or the morning, and then whatever when I didn't do in the evening or the morning, I'll do the other. And then I also tend to use raw honey a lot to cleanse my skin. Do you recommend dandelion tea for liver detox? When is it best to drink? It's not something that I often recommend. Like, I actually prefer nettle, but I think dandelion can be good too. And I've been known to blend different herbs a time or two. I really like to buy just like loose leaf bulk herbs and mix them. So if I'm trying to achieve a certain goal, then that's what I'll do. But yeah, I don't think there's like a proper time to drink it. It's just whenever we get it in. Hi, Jess. I just started FN. Amazing. I have so much confidence in myself. Amazing. What do you suggest for reoccurring cycles of bacterial vaginosis? For years, I have no thyroid, maybe low stomach acid. Yeah, it can definitely point to like just gut issues in general, especially if they're popping up at certain times of the cycle. So a lot of women will say that their BV pops up when their estrogen is at its highest. And so if that's the correlation, then we really need to support estrogen detox, raw carrot salad, making sure that we're supporting the liver and just overall like supporting elimination of estrogen. If it's just like randomly popping up, then we really do need to dive into our gut a little bit more. So yeah, I personally like to look at patterns, and this goes for just about anything that I'm dealing with, like what are the patterns? And sometimes that just can take like paying attention and collection of data, but oftentimes we'll find there's some type of pattern, whether it's coming after something or it's coming at a certain time of the cycle, or it's coming after like a stressful event or whatever it might be. We start to figure out like, okay, this is cyclical in some way. And that really helps us explore, okay, what can we do about it? A little confused about my super high calcium level on my HTMA. Does this mean it's in the tissues but not being used well by my body? Would consuming a lot of dairy be discouraged with high calcium level? Yes, like for traditional HTMA people, they would be like, oh my gosh, avoid calcium. But this often means like what we would want to look into is like a calcium shell. And oftentimes we want to get the calcium from the soft tissues into the bones and the teeth. And so in a lot of cases, when you are taught HTMA, if somebody has super elevated calcium, or they have even something called a calcium shell, which just means it's like through the roof, is vitamin K2 is usually used to help get the calcium and direct it to where it needs to go. Whatever I do, I can't get digestion to get better than 2 to 3 days. Any advice, please? Sometimes people like do have thyroid issues that they need to get checked out and sometimes get some type of medication for if nothing else is working. And then also just like figuring out why our digestion is moving so slowly. Sometimes it's simply just magnesium, like we just need more magnesium. Sometimes it's a little bit more complicated than that. But yeah, a lot of people are magnesium deficient, and that is responsible for the relaxation of muscles, including the colon, which is a muscle. Oops, meant to type I have no thyroid, so maybe low stomach acid. Yeah, I understood that. Is your FN enough info to get my girlfriend started on eating pro-metabolic and a good foundation? Yeah. The first Fully Nourished that I made was just like the basics of pro-metabolic eating. And then when I went back and redid the whole program, I really expanded on the content. And I think for some people, it's like probably a little too much information, but I really wanted to educate women about their bodies. And so that's why there's a whole module dedicated to just helping a woman understand her body and her hormones and how things are functioning. And then there's a whole module dedicated to the mindset behind like why we want to ditch dieting, why we believe what we believe about food. And then going forward, like I totally teach people how to eat, how to integrate it so that it doesn't feel overwhelming. And then we also like talk about the supplements. We talk about additional like lifestyle factors. So pretty much everything that I talk about and more is in Fully Nourished. Can you use Ona's progesterone oil vaginally? I've personally used it vaginally. I pretty much like, if you guys ask it, I've probably done it. But yeah, I've used it vaginally plenty of times. How do I know if I would benefit from a castor oil pack? Any negative effects possible? I personally haven't seen any negative effects. Like some people say don't do them while you're pregnant, or some people even say like don't do them on your period. But then there's this one lady that's like super into castor oil packs called the Queen of Thrones. That's her little shindig. And she says that they're super great to do during the period. They just, make you bleed what you were going to bleed already just a little faster, so it can appear that you're bleeding heavier. I'm not really sure. Like, there's conflicting information about doing them while you're on your period, but I've only seen benefit from them. I really think they're pretty, they're pretty gentle. I mean, it's really just putting oil on your skin and letting it sit there with a piece of wool. I have not seen any negative effects. There have been a few people that have reported to me that like it made their gallbladder contract. You can hear your gallbladder kind of like gurgling, and they felt some kind of like die-off reactions, and because they couldn't have a bowel movement right away, they kind of felt like headachy, kind of like they needed, to poop. That's really what it is. But yeah, that's some people have told me that. How do I know, or sorry if this is dumb, but how do you know the difference between water retention and just typical bloating? Usually water retention is like you can kind of see it like all over your body. You feel kind of puffy, like your face might be puffy, maybe your arms are puffy, your legs are puffy. A lot of women get it in their like ankles and feet. Whereas like bloating is really just like their belly. But yeah, bloating and water retention are kind of the same thing. I mean, when we're bloated, we're usually retaining water. They're just two different words for it. How do you diagnose hypothyroidism? Conventional doctors have run a full thyroid panel and they say everything is fine. Will it come up on a Dutch test maybe? I did one of those and waiting for results. I personally am a nutritionist, so I don't diagnose anything. Sometimes we have to dive a little deeper and do our own research. So we have to remember that thyroid hormone is in the bloodstream, does not necessarily reflect what our cells are responding to. And sometimes you have to actually do some digging to see evidence of this. So this might look like looking at minerals on a hair tissue mineral analysis and seeing that, wow, potassium levels are very, very low. And we know that potassium is needed to respond to thyroid hormone. So sometimes things like that can be more helpful if we're still having hypothyroid symptoms, but our blood thyroid hormone is normal. We also want to look at temperature, but if you think that or suspect it, I highly recommend reading the book by Rhoda Barnes, Hypothyroidism, the Unsuspecting Illness. And it's a very informative book. I had a really weird period last month where I only had a flow for a few days and just constant spotting for 3 weeks after. My naturopath recommended progestin for 3 months. Any advice? I would listen to her. If she's saying that progesterone is a good uh, option, a lot of times mid-cycle spotting does point to estrogen dominance. How do you feel about Live Well brand collagen peptides? I'm not familiar with that brand, so I'm not sure. Been FN for 3 months or so. Just started my menstrual cycle, and it's the worst yet. Super clotty plus dark blood, really sore breast. Does this signify I should be working on something in particular? I highly recommend going back and reviewing the last lesson of Module 2, where we talk about kind of like what to expect. Sometimes women will go through this like detox period where they have 3 periods that are really, really bad. It's usually like 90 days. I always say, give yourself 90 days. If after the 90 days, you're still really like things feel like they're getting worse instead of getting better, then something needs to change. We need to probably support detoxification more, support the gut more, like really maybe start to dig into minerals and things like that. But a lot of women report that they detox estrogen for the first couple of months. Wondering if you know what could possibly cause dizziness immediately when I start eating. When it does happen, as soon as I swallow my first bite, I get dizzy, room spinning. Doctors aren't sure. Thanks. Have you been tested for like Candida, like fungus, any bacteria maybe up in the stomach or in the high up digestive tract? Have you noticed like patterns in regards to what types of food? Does it matter what type of food? Have you been looked at for like a hiatal hernia? Yeah, like sometimes it's hard to figure out, but like I said before, when I'm trying to figure out something that's wrong with me, or if a client's trying to dig into their health, we're always asking patterns. We're looking for any type of pattern. Is it after a food? Is it with a food? Is it after you walk out the door? Is it after, any specific pattern? Because if there is a pattern and it's like, oh, every time I do XYZ, this happens. It's like, okay, what's going on? So if you're like, only pattern is me eating. Okay, there's something going on when that food hits the stomach. So have they dug into what's going on in the stomach, in the esophagus? Is it possibly GERD or heartburn that's expressing in a different way? Like that's what I would be looking at, is what are the patterns? Vitamin E seems to be causing rough detox symptoms for me. Taking 1 capsule of poo for protection, I take less, more. I definitely would not take more. I'm someone that if I'm getting any type of detox, I always scale back. So I do not want any symptoms of detox unless it's something very mild, like maybe like a zit or something like that. If I am experiencing harsh detox, I always scale back because I don't want to push the body harder than it's telling me. And if the body's telling me absolutely no, then it's an absolute no. So I think that people that are experiencing rough detox with vitamin E should probably just stick to like once a week, maybe twice a week. But yeah, really scaling back and slowly easing up once the body has adjusted. Do you have any resources for autoimmune disease? Looking specifically for info on alopecia. Been eating FN for 5 months. Noticing it is flaring up again. So autoimmune diseases, interestingly enough, if you have an autoimmune disease, I highly, highly, highly recommend investing in the Root Cause Protocol 101 course. I think it's like $99. It is so informative and it will completely blow your mind in regards to iron and the connection between iron and autoimmune disease. So I think anyone with an autoimmune disease should research that and look at it through the context of, remember that when iron is stored in the tissues, so is estrogen. Estrogen and iron are like BFFs, and they always go together. And so, I think that learning about iron is very complementary to Fully Nourished because it kind of all really works together. Can you put caffeine on your hair for hair growth, or does it have to be ingested? I don't tolerate caffeine well. I put it in my hair like spray that I put on my scalp, and I've also been using Noel's or Forever Healthy Hairs. It's called Stay. It's like a liquid serum you put on your scalp, and it has caffeine in it, and it works really well. Just for curiosity, should every woman on paper with PCOS be able to ovulate with help? I don't want to say yes or no. It's kind of like an interesting question. I don't like to look at women with PCOS. I like to look at women in general, because a woman who has PCOS has it for a reason, right? There's some deep imbalances going on. And so in theory, balancing out those imbalances could possibly result in an ovulation, and not really looking at it through the lens of, I have PCOS, so therefore I might not be able to ovulate. I think for some women it can be harder than others, because there are sometimes issues, layers of issues going on. But I've seen hundreds of women who have balanced their cycle and been able to ovulate after they got to the root of their imbalances. Is that saying every woman can? No, because I haven't seen every woman or experienced working with every woman. But from what I've seen, I think a lot of women can, if they're focusing on the right things. While someone is reintroducing dairy, mainly milk, and having a sip each meal for 2 weeks, is rumbling and slight discomfort a sign that they are intolerant and won't be able to handle it? Not necessarily. I mean, I would expect that the first couple of weeks, like, the body's gonna need to adjust. As long as it's not like super, super uncomfortable. But yeah, just with any food. I mean, I like to use the example of when women are under eating and then they start eating enough. They start eating plenty of food. Most of them struggle with like constipation, bloating, like their digestive system's just screaming at them. Is this a sign that their body just can't tolerate food? No, it's a sign that their digestive system's like really not working very well and probably needs energy. And so usually when they just keep going, they're consistent with it, their body starts to adjust. Now, I'm not saying that this is always the case with dairy. Some people just don't do well with it, but I wouldn't look at like grumbling or rumbling stomach as a sign that like it's just not working. What direction would you go in to address extreme bloating that's persisted after GI map, SIBO, Candida parasite protocols, and eating pro-metabolic for several months? What direction would you go in? I would go in the direction of minerals. Minerals always. Most people just don't make the connection that minerals pretty much drive the digestive tract, and because the digestive tract is driven by enzymes. And then I would also just go in the direction of just straight up hypothyroidism. Some people are just serious hypothyroid, but remember, most people are hypothyroid because they're deficient in minerals. So when people are deficient in magnesium, they have excessive calcium in their tissues, they're deficient in potassium. All those things are going to affect muscular contractions, but it's also going to affect just enzymes in general. It's going to affect how the pancreas works. It's going to affect how the gallbladder works. It's going to affect how every single cell responds to thyroid hormone. And that really determines the energy of the cells. And so a lot of people, when they think gut issues, they love to just think of their gut as like this separate entity from their metabolism and minerals and nourishment, because it's uncomfortable when you're eating all this food and your gut's not functioning well. But if the gut's not functioning well and you've done 1,000 gut protocols, that should tell us it's not a problem with the bacteria in our gut. If we've tried to like just kill and destroy all the SIBO and the Candida and nothing's working, it's like, okay. Just stop doing that and approach it from a whole different place. And so minerals are usually the name of the game. And a lot of people with severe gut issues are seriously iron overloaded as well. So I always like focus minerals, and thyroid, which usually is minerals. Because when people are cellularly hypothyroid, they're usually really deficient in potassium and sometimes magnesium. They have like really high calcium in the tissues. They need sodium, like their adrenals just need some help. So there's a lot of factors, but that's usually the direction that I go, because that's usually the type of people that I work with. Like most people have already gone to multiple functional practitioners when I start working with them as a client. And so they've already done all that stuff. And so I don't have to redo any of that stuff. We hit it from a different angle. Sorry, I lost my spot. Like, what's new, right? What is new? Here we go. I started eating dairy, goat milk, and cheese after years of being dairy-free, and I keep getting vaginal yeast infections. Help. I would be looking at my copper levels. I would be looking at estrogen and really working on estrogen because Candida and yeast just really, really like estrogen, and they can live when there's not enough copper. But yeah, and if you have an Instagram, I highly recommend watching my IGTV episode on Candida. Can you explain why crown prince oysters are still okay to eat, even though they have the reproduction harm warning on them? I remember you answered this before, but forgot what you said. Yeah, so that warning is on pretty much anything that has any low levels of naturally occurring metals. I live in California, and so we have that label on literally everything I receive in the mail has that label, that warning on it. It's pretty much that anything that has even a trace amount of naturally occurring metals has to have that warning on it. And so I really think it is to distract people into fearing certain things when in reality we should be afraid of some other things. And I personally don't worry about it. But of course, it's whatever people are comfortable with. I personally don't think like that company like has my best interest in mind. So like I don't think like, wow, thank you so much for warning me about this. Like I'm sure this is the only thing damaging that I could be exposed to. Like there's plenty of other harmful things in our environment that don't have warning that we continue to expose ourselves to, is what I'm trying to say. Have you ever read about neuroplasticity or neurofeedback? Curious about your thoughts. Yeah, I really like there's a book I really like to read called The Body Keeps Score. That's a really good book to kind of get started if you're interested in that. EDMR therapy, or EMDR, I think it's EMDR therapy. Like that's something that I really like. Like I don't like regular talk therapy. I think it's absolutely pointless. I think that a lot of people, it just like reinforces people's traumas, and because they just like it feels good to a brain that's stuck in fight or flight to re-talk about negative experiences. But the more we talk about them, the more we confirm them in our brain. It's kind of like almost like you think of it as like creating a path, and then you keep carving the path deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's really hard to retrain your brain to think in a different way and go a different path. So I really like neurofeedback therapy, or just neurofeedback in general. It can be very helpful to like uncover the layers of trauma in the brain. I've kind of explored it a little bit. It's not something that, like, you know how when you're implementing like health things and your health journey, there are just certain things where you're like, not in this season, like it's just not time yet. It's one of those things that I'm going to get around to dig deeper into, but like right now in this season, I'm just not quite like there or ready to completely commit to it. Taking mitigate stress magnesium, should this only be taken 30 minutes away from meals, or do you have any other suggestions on how to take it? I just take it away from food so it doesn't lower my stomach acid. But yeah, I don't really stress about how I take it. I pretty much take it, like sometimes I'll take it during a workout. Sometimes I'll just add it to like my adrenal cocktail. Like I just take it away from food, like pretty much. Some people say that it messes with their sleep, and so they won't take it like right before they go to bed. I just think it's like better to just pay attention to how our body responds to something than try to take it a specific way. Best, fastest way to shred carrots for the carrot salad. I just bought a rotary shredder thinking that would be awesome, and it just wasn't. I personally like, I don't shred them anymore. I ribbon them with what is it called? A vegetable peeler, because it's just more fun that way. And it's not going to be necessarily fast, but what I do is I do it for the whole week. So I will ribbon 5 or 6 carrots, put them in a mason jar of cold water so they stay crispy all week long. And then I just like grab some for my carrot salad every day. That's like probably the quickest way that I've found out. There are like vegetable shredders that you can like throw it through the shredder and it's like, it just like shreds up. Or some people use like the food processor one that does the shredding. I think it's just whatever works for you. But I think that packing them in water is probably the most important part of that, because if you shred carrots and then you just leave them in the air, that's when they're going to start to grow like all that bacteria and stuff, because you've kind of like broken the barrier that has protected them. Had a test done not too long ago that showed I have parasites in my gut plus liver. Do you have any recommendations on how one could approach addressing that? I really think like just some like clove, wormwood, just like regular anti-parasitic herbs work very effectively. There are a lot of like clove and wormwood. It's called like black walnut, wormwood. Oftentimes there's clove in those like tinctures available. And yeah, I mean, they'll wipe them right out as long as they're consistent. I also like a supplement called Scram by Health Force. I think it can be very effective. But remember, guys, that parasites actually do a job for us. And when we have parasites, we should ask ourselves why we have them in the first place, why our body allowed them to take up residence, because nothing happens in the body that the body doesn't allow or that the body doesn't do for survival. And remember, parasites love to feed off of iron. They love to feed off of heavy metals. And sometimes if the body has a toxic burden too large to handle on its own, parasites are actually helping with that. And so this is why I see like people really working to eradicate parasites. Like they're doing all these weird parasite protocols and they're just trying to eradicate them, and they just keep coming back. And it's because they're not fixing the problem. Now, I'm not saying that like eradicating them is a big deal. Like it can be really fun to find worms, like I'm not gonna lie. But at the same time, if we're finding that it's hard to eradicate them, there's probably a reason why they're there. But yeah, I find that like something like Scram, usually the most effective herbs are like cloves, black walnut, wormwood. Those types of things tend to work really well. Just know like those types of herbs are big fat no-nos. When we're breastfeeding, when we're trying to get pregnant, when we're pregnant, like those are no-nos for little ones. They're great for like prepping, and they're great for trying to eradicate certain things, but they're just not safe for like pregnancy, breastfeeding, that kind of thing. Hey Jess, have you heard of calcium D-glucarate to help with liver detox? Hopefully it can help with eczema. Calcium D-glucarate, I'm assuming, I know you said calcium D-gluconate, but I'm assuming you meant glucarate, actually helps lower an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase in the gut. So beta-glucuronidase can help, so when you are detoxing estrogen, it comes out of the liver via the bile into the intestine to be eliminated when you poop. But some people have bacteria that are creating something called beta-glucuronidase, which is an enzyme that actually reactivates estrogen in the gut and can actually cause the body to reabsorb that estrogen and reuse that estrogen. We don't want that to happen. And so for some people who have this high beta-glucuronidase and they're reactivating estrogen, calcium D-glucarate lowers beta-glucuronidase. And so it can be helpful for those people. But this is why supplements can be really like hit or miss for some people, because let's say you had high beta-glucuronidase. Calcium D-glucarate is going to really, really help with estrogen symptoms. But if you don't, then you're probably going to be like, calcium D-glucarate does nothing for me. So it just really depends on the person. Where to start for 73-year-old woman with high cholesterol except removing PUFA? I would just look at like really probably hypothyroidism, like straight up, are there thyroid problems? Because that's usually the biggest thing. But remember that red light does help us convert cholesterol into hormones like vitamin D, which is really a hormone, and other hormones, sex hormones, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, all that kind of stuff. So we make all of our hormones except for thyroid hormone from cholesterol. And so we need red light, vitamin A, and really good thyroid hormone to do that. So if we have high cholesterol, we should be asking ourselves, why are we not converting it into the things that we need? Is awful armpit odor a sign of iron issue? Usually when people are detoxing iron or estrogen or other metals, their body odor is rank. I have definitely experienced that before. Chlorophyll really helps with that. Chlorophyll is they call it an internal deodorizer, which I'm like, who comes up with this stuff? But it does help with it. When you make your herbal concentrate, do you use vodka or plain alcohol? I actually just like infuse it into water and let it steep for like 24 to 48 hours. And then we'll just use like a sprouting lid for a mason jar so I can just strain it, and I'll just add like 2 ounces of that concentrate and the rest with like warm water, sometimes some cranberry concentrate, just, detoxy things. And it kind of makes it into a tea. You can also just steep them into a tea, like that works too, but I always like to cut down on time. And so if I can make the concentrate and then add it to some warm water, it just is like a very quick tea that's very concentrated. But tinctures are effective in different ways. So yeah, tinctures can be made with, I usually like to make tinctures with vodka, like just, organic vodka. But alcohol can be used too. Someone recommended adding milk thistle to my diet to boost liver health. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, I like milk thistle. It's actually a part of the detox lemonade recipe, or it's an optional part of it. Yeah, I like milk thistle. I don't like to use it long term. I feel like it loses effectiveness, and it can also I just don't like taking any herb long term. I like to take breaks, so that's why with milk thistle, I usually recommend doing 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or something like that. But yeah, it can be very supportive of the liver. If you have to pee right after drinking, is that a sign of thyroid issues? Also, always freezing. Usually it's a sign that our metabolism is just really sluggish, and we need to focus on balancing that out. If I crave potatoes and bacon but have SIBO Candida, do you think those foods would be okay to try? My local farm has soy-free pork. I personally don't eat to feed my bacteria. I eat to fuel my body. If my bacteria decide to have a party, then I take note, but I also know that supporting my body and feeding my body and fueling my metabolism is way more important than worrying about bacteria in my gut. Bacteria in my gut will respond to a healthy body in the way that I want. So, remember, we have SIBO because our body is a good host for it. So I personally don't like to do super restrictive diets when there's gut issues, unless you're seriously uncomfortable. If you're just so uncomfortable that you can't function, of course, cut the things out that are making you uncomfortable. But a super restricted diet doesn't really get anyone anywhere. Is keratosis pilaris vitamin A deficiency, gut issue, hormonal, or stress related? I think it's all 4. I think it has different aspects to it. I personally, I experimented with a lot of vitamin A, didn't really fix it at all. Gut issues tend to be the thing that, for me at least, I think is a majority of it. Hormonal, yes, because of course estrogen is going to increase inflammation. Progesterone can help with lower inflammation. So, and then stress is of course going to increase PUFAs, increase inflammation, increase gut issues. So all those things that you just mentioned kind of go into one another. But I think they all are a factor. But I think keratosis pilaris definitely has to do with inflammation for sure. How did you heal your scalp issues? My scalp has psoriasis and sores. So awful. I've been healing my metabolism, but scalp is still struggling 8 months later. Yeah. So for me, I found that it was pretty gut related. And so I did a round of FC-Cytal and Dysbiocide by Biotics Research. I also did bought flowers of sulfur from an online apothecary and did sulfur rinses on my hair. I don't know necessarily how safe those are. Don't take it from me. I was just on a quest to get rid of the fungus on my scalp. And that's when I actually started doing the borax rinses that everyone freaks out about, that I put borax on my scalp, but I just dissolved a little bit of borax in warm water and did those. I also did apple cider vinegar rinses. And that's actually when I discovered the Morocco Method products. I would take Morocco Method, and if you've ever used Morocco Method, it's this clay sludge. It's not really soap, it's a sludge. I would take it, and it tells you to dilute it, but I didn't dilute it. I took it and put it straight on my scalp and rubbed it in and just let it sit there for 10 minutes. And I would just let it sit. And that was the only thing that provided me sweet relief, because similarly, I had sores and I was just nothing is working. But I came to the conclusion that it had something to do with fungus, bacteria, there was something going on. And I can't really pinpoint the one thing that helped fix it because I was doing so much at the time, but I do think it was very much gut related. How would meal ideas, and another note is I found that it really popped up during winter time, and ever since I started doing red light, it's never come back. So that could be another factor for me. How would meal ideas supplements differ for an insulin resistant client? How do you suggest tackling it? Everyone's different, so they have to kind of find their carbohydrate tolerance, and also some people actually need to combine carbs. So like, for example, at meals, they do better with like a little roots and fruits, or mixing like squashes and fruits. And it really goes by how they're feeling, how their temps and pulses are doing, like how their other symptoms are improving. And then of course, like keeping an eye on blood sugar is always a good idea. But insulin resistance is happening in the cell. And so there are many, many factors. But, one of the factors is magnesium, very important. Polyunsaturated fats drive insulin resistance, so those go. Usually vitamin E is a good idea. So it just depends. But a lot of people see, I don't look at somebody and when they come to me, they're like, I want to get rid of my insulin resistance. I don't look at that. Like, I'm not like, okay, let's do this for insulin resistance. I'm looking at their whole picture and I'm like, okay, they have gut issues. They have this, they have that, they have this, they have that, they have this, they have that. Of course, it's driving imbalances, possibly one of them being insulin resistance. So we're going back to, okay, are we balancing blood sugar? Are we getting cortisol balanced? Usually people with insulin resistance are very estrogen dominant. They're not ovulating, and so they're not making progesterone. That's of course going to affect our sensitivity to insulin. So there are usually so many factors. And if we have tunnel vision and we're only focusing on one thing, it oftentimes holds us back. And so yes, we want to keep it in our mind, but we also need to look at our body as a whole and say, okay, I'm struggling with this issue because of overall imbalances, and I need to get to the bottom of them. So that was, a rant, but yeah, I usually address it, balancing blood sugar, eating plenty of protein, figuring out fat tolerance. Some people need a little more fat, a little less carbs. Some people need more carbs, a little less fat. Niacinamide can be helpful. Magnesium can be helpful. And getting to the root of gut issues is usually pretty helpful. When you start coffee enemas, do they interrupt bowel movements for the rest of the day? I seem to have crampy feelings the rest of the day. They shouldn't. And for some people, it does really bother them. And so some people are just like, I don't like doing them because they mess with my bowels too much. What adaptogenic herbs can be taken while pregnant? That's something to dig a little deeper in. It just depends. But most adaptogenic herbs are I just would stay away from them during pregnancy. I know some people like to use mushrooms like reishi, but there's not a lot of research done. So, some people are like, I take them, no problem. And some people are like, I would never take them. So I think it just depends on context, but I usually stay away from herbs unless there's some evidence that they're safe during pregnancy. My mom's vitamin D is low on blood tests. What would you recommend instead of a supplement? She doesn't believe me when I tell her not to take the supplement. It's kind of one of those things that if people are not willing to do, the research, it can sometimes be really hard. But remember, we need magnesium to make vitamin D. Most people who have low vitamin D have very low magnesium. And then there are many factors, but usually it's an iron issue. And so if we have low vitamin D, high cholesterol, or autoimmunity, I always recommend investing into the Root Cause Protocol 101 series. It's like I said, it's $99, and it's amazing and enlightening for people who think that these issues are not related, because they are. What are the benefits of proteolytic enzymes? Have you used them? Yes, I've used systemic enzymes. I personally have used them multiple times. I've used them in a gut protocol to break down biofilms. I've used them to help kind of dissolve some inflammation, because I dislocated my shoulder a couple of years ago and I needed to help with that. I've used them just intermittently to just experiment with some things, but I've found that they're most effective for people that have really inflammatory joint issues or lots of inflammation, maybe old injuries, C-section scars, things like that, impairing their breathing or things like that. But they are meant to be taken on an empty stomach. They absorb directly into the bloodstream, and they break down foreign proteins. Some people will say they break down fibrosis. I guess the jury's still out on that, but the evidence, like people's experiences are, very telling. People see a lot of benefit from them. So I think that it's one of those things where some people just try them because they have inflammatory issues, they have scar tissue from old surgeries or injuries, and they really want to work on breaking down inflammation. There's a lot of people who have said they've used them for like fibroids or blocked fallopian tubes. I've had plenty of people tell me that they've used them for that. So anything having to do with like fibrosis or scar tissue, people tend to use them for that. How long can we sit under a red light? I don't know. How long can you? I mean, I'll be honest, I turn my red light on like when I start to relax in the evening after dinner, which is usually around like 7 o'clock. I will lay under that thing until I go to bed, which sometimes is like 10 or 11. So I'm not saying that's a good idea, but I do that. I lay under it for probably 3 or 4 hours a night. And I like, I have like a wind down routine. So I go into my room. I, turn on my bedside lamp, table lamp, lamp. That is a red light bulb. I turn on my red light therapy device, my chicken lamp. And then I kind of like do some journaling, maybe do some coloring, like whatever I feel. I have kind of like my box of tricks for de-stressing. And, sometimes I'll watch a show. Sometimes I'll be reading a book. I like to read, and all the while the red lamp is on. So sometimes I'm not sitting directly under it or laying directly under it. I'm just kind of like in the room sitting on my bed. But there is a long period of time where I'm laying under it. You said to incorporate eggshell calcium if you can't handle dairy. Is this a supplement or you literally crush up eggshells and eat it? That's really what it is. I mean, I can't find a really good eggshell calcium supplement that it doesn't have like vitamin D added or something like that. So I personally just make it myself. I just take a Ziploc. I have like a composting bin that I take out to the compost. So I usually have a Ziploc next to it. So I remind myself, because usually I'm just cracking eggs and throwing it into the compost bin. And I'm like, oh shoot, I need to save those eggs. So I have a Ziploc bag that sits next to the compost bin, and I put my eggshells in there just every day. I collect the eggshells until I build up a good kind of like store of them. And then I'll throw them in a pot to boil them just to get rid of any nasties on them, and then lay them out on a baking sheet and kind of put them in a very low level oven. I usually put it at the lowest temperature that the oven will go. I think it's like 230 or something. Let them kind of bake just to dry off and kind of get crispy. And then you can put them in a food processor or a coffee grinder or a Vitamix if you have one, like a blender, just something that's going to like shred them up. But just as a note, like really make sure that stuff is powdered, because that stuff is sharp. And if you don't powder it very well, it will hurt your stomach. And I usually take it with food, but yeah. It's literally just grinding up eggshells. Hi, Jessica. I have eczema, red itchy rashes on hands, face, following metabolic diet, bone broth, vitamin E, shilajit, low stress, filtered water. Any recommendation? Thank you for your help. So if we have skin issues and we're doing like all the right things, sometimes it just takes time. And like I said, remember, our skin is a detox organ, as is our liver and our gut. And so we have to remember, if we're not detoxifying fast enough out of our liver and our gut, our skin is going to detoxify. And the body specifically loves to move heavy metals out of the skin. So, sometimes it's just like we have an initial reaction to some stuff, we're moving some stuff, and eventually it goes away. Sometimes we actually have to get to the bottom of what's going on in our gut, what's preventing us maybe from detoxifying well. Sometimes this is like bacteria and fungus that we need to work on. Sometimes it's just constipation, like we've got to get our bowels moving faster. Sometimes people will use Cascara sagrada or Trifala, things that or magnesium, just to get the bowels moving faster. But we want to really make sure our body's eliminating toxins as efficiently as possible. And then if we're not, we got to make sure we're doing our raw carrot salad, detox lemonade, make sure we're getting plenty of fiber in our diet from the right sources, and see if that helps. How many grams of carbs are needed per day or per meal for thyroid health? With SIBO, I can only do low FODMAP, fruits, and sugars. I think a minimal of 150 is probably a good idea, just because that's like what the adrenals need. Sometimes people can drop a little lower, but usually that's when the temps start dropping lower. So I usually aim for at least 150 for most people if they can tolerate it. If they can't, sometimes you have to work up to that. Like, don't just go from eating 50 grams of carbs to 150. That's not going to end well for anybody. But usually if you're just trying to find a good place to like stick around, for some people, I try not to jump below 150 for people with like gut issues and stuff. I've been pro-metabolic for quite a few months, but still not ovulating. I've never properly ovulated as my breasts didn't develop properly. Do you have any advice on such bad PCOS? First of all, like, we really want to work on our mindset. Like, sometimes just our mindset is keeping us in a really stressed out state. Like, we're thinking like we have really bad PCOS and, this is the place that we're at. But, I highly recommend reading the Period Repair Manual by Dr. Lara Bryden if you haven't already read it. She talks a lot about bioidentical progesterone in there being very helpful for some women with PCOS, and that might be a very enlightening section of the book for you. I think that would be a very good book to read, especially if you're wondering, like, is it possible to ovulate? There are a lot of women who I've worked with who never ovulated and were put on birth control before they actually went through puberty, who were able to ovulate again. But it took a good amount of time and a lot of consistency. It wasn't something that happened overnight, that's for sure. Hi, Jess. What could cause spotting after the period for about a week? It's been happening to my sister for 4+ years. There's a lot going on. She's vegan and has both lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. Usually, mid-cycle spotting has a lot to do with estrogen, and can also be a sign of hypothyroidism, which, again, often go hand in hand. But yeah, if someone has autoimmune diseases and is vegan, there's probably estrogen issues going on. Those are usually issues that, those are things that are usually paired with estrogen dominance. I often have normal pulses, but my temperature is low. What does this indicate? Usually we need our thyroid hormone getting into our cells. We need our metabolism to speed up. And so we got to work on our metabolic function, thyroid function. Any thoughts on Ray Pete's recommendation on using low-dose doxycycline? Thanks as always. I personally don't like the use of antibiotics. I just think that a lot of people have overused antibiotics nowadays. Most of us have been on many, many rounds of them. And so I think that a lot of times they can be problematic. Now, for people who have very bad gut issues that are not resolved, I kind of think like, what the heck, why not try something? I have seen a few people have amazing results taking antibiotics specifically for stuff like SIBO that couldn't be eradicated, but some people don't. Like, they'll take it and they think like, oh my gosh, this is going to be my answer. And then they're like, no, it didn't work out. So I think it just depends on the person, but knowing that it might be a great fix, but for some people it might not. What do you think about placenta encapsulation? I personally won't do it just because, sorry, it just grosses me out. Just like we wouldn't like drink our own menstrual blood. I mean, I know there are some people that do that, but I personally wouldn't eat my own placenta. That like traditionally was never done. It was actually usually like taken, planted with a tree, and then the tree would be representation of the new life. But we have to remember that the placenta makes us a lot of hormones like HCG, progesterone, and even estrogen during pregnancy. So it's very rich in hormones. It is rich in nutrients, but there's also the toxins that are the problem and making their way through the umbilical cord that are what makes me nervous about it. I just don't necessarily know if I would want to be exposed to all the toxins, because the umbilical cord is preventing a lot of toxins from flowing through, but there are some that do get through. And so I don't like it, but I do think that there's a lot of people that see benefit from taking placenta because of the progesterone. There are so many women struggle with almost like postpartum depression, Dr. Katharina Dalton actually talks about this in her books, like the PMS Bible and Once a Month, where this sudden drop in progesterone is the problem. It's making them feel awful and very depressed and moody. And so I do think progesterone is important postpartum, but is the placenta the best way to get it? I don't know. I don't know. I'm going to do something with mine, but I probably am not going to be consuming it. I'm also 7 months pregnant eating FN, but my digestion has slowed down so much and it's so hard to eat. Any advice? Thank you, Jess. Sometimes we just need, like, in pregnancy, it's usually a good idea to do the the thing that's the least invasive. A lot of my pregnant clients have told me that stewed prunes are very helpful. So they'll just take a few prunes, kind of stew them, drink the juice, and then eat the stewed prune that's very soft and kind of like filled with water or bone broth. Some women like to use magnesium. Some women just need to increase their fat intake. So, a little bit more grass-fed butter and things to kind of lubricate everything. But yeah, a lot of women tend to get pretty constipated towards the end of pregnancy, especially if they're starting to see like hypothyroid type symptoms. Starting to see the ability to digest dairy products adequately as a superpower. Haha. Yeah, it can be very hard. It's not like a cut and dry thing. That's for sure. Do you like diatomaceous earth? How to take it as a silica supplement, cycles of 2 weeks and stop, or would you take it on a daily basis? I don't necessarily hate it. I don't love it. I've used it before, and specifically in like gut type protocols. It is a rich source of silica. I would just take it away from food. That's the way that I would take it. But yeah, I personally don't like being on any supplement long term. I always take breaks from everything. Thoughts on zinc oxide every day, physical sunscreen. I know a lot of people use it. I personally don't. I don't necessarily like putting something on my skin all the time. I like to let my skin breathe, but that's just my personal problems. But I know a lot of people use it. Would it be counterproductive to do castor oil packs if our bowel movement time is slow? Some women actually say that castor oil packs help them have more regular bowel movements. Hi, Jess. Is eating muscle meat every day too much if you're on a metabolism healing journey, specifically hypothyroidism? I've heard some amino acids like methionine, cysteine, tryptophan, and histidine could be thyroid suppressive. Would having muscle meats a couple times a week be better in this situation? Yeah, for some people it is. Now, I don't like to give like blanket rules because some people get fearful and they get stressed and then that doesn't work. But if you have questions like these are really good questions to just experiment with. Some people don't even realize they're a problem until they try to experiment with an alternative. And so if you're worried that this is possibly holding your thyroid back, a great way to go about it would be to experiment and see if it's holding your thyroid back. And the way that you would do that is just eat it less and see how you feel. And make observations. That's kind of like, I've had a lot of people like send me DMs this week or ask questions and say like, well, how do I know that this is true? Or, how do I know, like, I don't really want to experiment with my health. And I'm like, well, that is the part of the human existence. Like, how do you think that anybody finds what works for them? It takes a constant experimentation. And I know it can be exhausting or it can be kind of overwhelming, but that's kind of like human life in general. And if we're not constantly experimenting and paying attention to our body, we're usually stuck somewhere. You know what I mean? So I would say experiment. If you had to use a facial cleanser, which ingredients would you look out for? I just don't like to strip my skin. Like, you guys know, I don't use a lot of like body soap. I don't like to use like harsh cleansers. So I personally just stay away from soaps in general for the most part, unless they're like high quality, like goat milk soap, for example. So there's like 1,000 ingredients I look out for. I more opt towards like the least invasive skincare products, specifically soaps in general, because I just don't like to strip my skin. I use, it's called Clear by Forever Healthy Hair. I also have used raw honey for a really long time in the past. I have used coconut oil to just do oil cleansing, or MCT oil. So I like to use pretty basic things on my face. Sorry, one more thing. After getting nauseous with Unique E, I switched to Mitolife E. I was fine with the old one, but new formula makes me extremely nauseous. Any other recommendations? Yeah, a lot of people have been telling me that the new one makes them nauseous. And when I first started taking it, it was making me a little nauseous too until I took it with like a pretty high fat meal. Life Extensions is pretty good, as well as what's the other? Thorne has one called Ultimate E. Swanson's like Sunflower E is pretty decent. So those are ones. I know that some people have used Hey Dude's Tocovite, which is Idea Labs. But yeah, that's kind of what the ones that I opt for. I'm experiencing itching as I ease into pro-metabolic, also taking PUFA Protect. Any recs for easing the itching, but still easing in on the way of eating? Do you mean like itching, just like histamine type itching? I'm not really sure what you mean by itching, but yeah, a lot of people that have histamine issues do experience itching or hives or things like that. And just focusing in on copper, focusing in on vitamin B6, focusing in on magnesium can be very effective at helping the body, balance out iron and copper. Do you know if keratosis pilaris can occur on legs? Do you have any recs on how to treat or what it's caused from? Yeah, I've talked about keratosis pilaris a lot in this live, so go back and listen to some of the stuff. But yeah, I believe it can occur on the butt, on the legs, on the arms. And I think most people get it on their arms, but I think a lot of people get it on their legs. I think it has a lot to do with gut issues, inflammation, hormones. Like it has to do with really just the metabolism as a whole. And I wouldn't be looking on like how to treat it. I personally look at like how to balance my body as a whole. I've noticed that exfoliating my arms really well and putting a topical aspirin on really, really helps the appearance of it while I'm working on like the internal stuff. And whenever my gut is inflamed, like for example, when I eat something that I shouldn't have eaten, or maybe I was in a situation where I just didn't have the best option, I totally notice it flare up, like 100%. If you can give one piece of advice for preconception, what would it be? Eat enough and don't restrict dairy. That would be probably my best advice. The first few days of my 3-monthly period are awful. I can hardly move due to sickness, vertigo. I have a rocket salad every day, but I'm guessing estrogen is still really high. Well, if we're not having a bowel movement every day, we're not eliminating estrogen. So usually, like if our bowel movements and our estrogen are going to be related. So if we're constipated, if we're not having regular bowel movements, if our liver is not supported, those are all going to be things that can affect our detoxification and will therefore affect our cycle. Do you also have a general recommendation on a variety of meats through the week? Power proteins, muscle meat. How many meals per week is muscle meat appropriate if I consume beef, chicken, turkey typically? I'm more concerned with getting enough protein, so I don't really stress about like muscle meats. I just make sure I'm always drinking bone broth when I do eat muscle meats. I try to varietize, so my thing is like, okay, I eat 5 or 6 meals a day. I'm going to make sure that one meal is eggs, one meal is at least one meal is dairy. 2 meals are probably going to be muscle meats, and one meal is probably just going to be like collagen or gelatin. So yeah, I usually do muscle meats like once or twice a day. If I do it once a day, then I'm doing dairy twice a day. But yeah, I don't like want to eat every single meal as a muscle meat, but I don't stress about it as long as I'm getting plenty of gelatin in my diet. What type of magnesium do you recommend? I see recs for bicarbonate and glycinate. I'm prone to sleep issues, so wondering glycinate. I like to varietize magnesium as much as it's possible. So if it's possible to do both bicarbonate and glycinate, I like to combine the two. But if you only can choose one, I like glycinate. But bicarbonate can be very helpful for gut issues. My hubby has had dandruff for a while now. What should he look into? Fungus. Yeah, like most, I think it has a lot to do with fungus, but if fungus is not the issue, then overall just like the fats in the diet. So is he doing like a low PUFA diet? Is getting plenty of saturated fats, plenty of vitamin E, all the skin stuff. And then like I talked about before earlier, like I used to have horrible like psoriasis type dandruff, like just sores on my scalp. I had just a horrible scalp, and I found that it had a relationship with fungus. And apple cider vinegar rinses and sulfur rinses and borax rinses really helped. How many vitamin E and vitamin K supplements do you recommend to start off with? I'm scared of being more out of balance. I don't think we should take anything that we're scared of. If we're scared of something, it's going to actually probably react in our body very poorly. I can't make any supplement recommendations. You guys have to figure that out for yourself and figure out what works for you. And you shouldn't be contracting your health out to anyone, especially anyone on the internet. But I start with usually like fat soluble vitamins. I'll do once or twice a week. I don't think somebody should just dive in and take something every day unless they are confident and they're paying attention to their body. But if something scares us, it's probably not a good idea to take it. Is carrot salad okay to eat as part of a meal, or should it be eaten separately? I think it's just better if we get it in every day than stressing about how to get it in. Is it normal to start experiencing breakouts on the back after doing a detox lemonade for about a month? For some people, yeah. They'll start to get some detox reactions. Didn't want to start progesterone, so doctor recommended Androcalm. Couldn't find research on it, but the ingredients are saw palmetto, reishi mushroom, white peony, green tea, and pygeum bark. Any thoughts? It sounds like it's kind of like an adaptogenic type blend. Yeah, I am not very familiar with it though. Would you take or recommend a hormone balancing supplement containing folate, myoinositol, L-glutathione, DIM, ALA, and chromium? No. Yeah, no. Chromium's like pretty toxic. I know like people say it's good for blood sugar, but I'm just like, why? Yikes. Yeah, I'm not a big fan. Developed chicken skin looking patches on my knees and elbows. Any thoughts? Vitamin A, vitamin E, magnesium. How's gut? How's liver? Usually anything having to do with the skin, I always ask that question, like, are we supporting the gut? Are we supporting the liver? Like, are we getting enough fiber to bind to toxins and carry them out of the body? Sometimes when people go pro-metabolic, they think it's like a fiber-free diet. And I'm like, no, like you got to get enough fiber. It's just from roots and fruits now, majority of them. And if you're not getting enough fiber from those things and you're having a hard time getting enough, then cook up some greens, like have some greens. Make sure you add in like 2 raw carrots a day. Like make sure you're getting that fiber, especially when you're first transitioning over to pro-metabolic eating, because you're dumping all those toxins and that bile needs to bind to soluble fiber. And if it's not, it's just going to be reabsorbed and reused. And so make sure you're getting that fiber in. That was a rant, but yeah, that's just one. Usually like skin stuff, gut and liver. How much is your new gut program likely to be? Probably similar to Fully Nourished in price, maybe a little bit more just because of what it's going to offer. But yeah, I try to keep it around. I'll try to keep it around that price. What will show up on a GI test? It just depends on what GI test you get. Did keto for 7 months. The first 2 months were amazing, but after my body went into shock, I gained weight, not sleeping well, and high anxiety all day. How long does it take for your body to recover? It just depends. Like for me, it took probably 1.5 years for me to like fully recover. And I still had gut issues after that from keto. Like keto wrecked my gut, like wrecked it. But yeah, I mean, it took me a good 1.5 years. Some people, like I've seen it take, as short as 6 months, but it really just depends on what's going on. It's not about keto, but it's about what did keto do to the body? Like how many minerals did we lose? What gut imbalances were caused? What were we eating while on keto? Like how low carb were we? How was our thyroid and adrenals before we went keto? Like all those factors are going to play into how long it's going to take to recover. Like I already wasn't doing super well because I was already pretty low carb for years before I went keto. So that was just like nail in the coffin for me. But for some people, they only go keto for a couple months and their issues are mild. I shred the skin off the carrot skin and just eat the carrot that way. Is that going to work less effectively? Not necessarily. I mean, I think like just a carrot is fine, but sometimes the raw carrot salad, like the mixture of the oil, whether it's MCT oil, olive oil, or coconut oil, and vinegar and salt, all work together to make it a lot more powerful. Tendon pain and swollen wrist bones, working with a physio, but do you have tips on what to look into? Trigger pointing. Trigger pointing, trigger pointing, trigger pointing. And if you're really get into trigger pointing, like Mitigate Stress, you can get their free trigger pointing guide on their website. Just go to mitigatestress.com. That's like a great intro to trigger pointing. But if you like are into trigger pointing and you're like, wow, this is really helping me, really the way that you know that you need trigger pointing is when you start to trigger point, it hurts really bad. That's usually a sign like, okay, we need it. But functional patterns is an amazing investment. If trigger pointing is something that's like vibing with you and you find like, wow, I'm seeing a lot of benefit from it, functional patterns, I think, is a really great investment for most people. Can't find cranberry concentrate for liver detox recipe. Any substitutes, please? Just regular cranberry, like organic cranberry juice. It's just cranberry concentrate with water added. So you would just like use a good amount rather than a small amount. My PCOS fertility issues and irregular periods actually started after getting the, I won't say it, but I see what you said. Would this be accidental or can it be connected? Totally understand if you can't talk about it. Go on Amazon and I'm not going to say the word, but it's that word, On Trial, and it's a book. I highly recommend reading that book. It's the 3 letters, On Trial, and look for that book. Have you ever heard of hydrogen peroxide therapy? Yes, and I don't think it's safe. My water already has magnesium sulfate in it. Is it harmful to add magnesium bicarbonate to it? I don't see why it would be. But yeah, I'm not sure. What are your health goals for 2021? Get fit. No, just kidding. I really do need to lose some weight. I was super stressed in 2020. I did not take care of myself well, in the sense of like I wasn't eating enough. My minerals, like I just wasn't, I wasn't walking the walk, and I suffered the consequences from it. So I really like had to slow down and take some rest. Like November, December, you guys probably have noticed I haven't been as active on Instagram just because I'm just like trying to mentally recover. Social media can be a really hard place, especially because I grew so fast. Like at the beginning of the year, I only had 10,000 followers and now I have almost 80. And so it's just like, it can be a lot. And so I'm just trying to kind of like find a work-life balance in 2021. I also like want to get married, and like we want to get married and I want to start prepping to have a baby, you know, probably like next year, middle of next year, end of next year, possibly. So I'm just really starting to like be very good about nourishing my body. I do need to lose some weight. I gained probably like 20 pounds just from like stopping exercising, being super stressed out, not eating enough. Like I'm a kind of a clear person that if I don't eat enough, I gain weight. I need to eat more to lose more. So I have a good amount of muscle on my body, so I hide it well. I can carry my extra weight well, but I'm not, it's not like comfortable for me. I just need to get back into like a healthy movement routine. So yeah, for me, it's just like nourishing well, minerals. I got to balance those minerals out. And then just like losing some weight, more building muscle than anything else. It's not about me like wanting to change my body. It's just, I want to feel stronger and, be a little bit more comfortable, get back into a really good fitness routine. So that's really me. It's like 2020 was a build year for my business, but now it's like a me year and take care of myself year. And so that's really like 2021 goals. And that's why like I really wanted to start, the YouTube channel is going to be launched the second week of February. And I will start vlogging eventually on the YouTube channel. I haven't been vlogging yet, but when I do, when I'm ready, I will start vlogging because I know you guys like to see like what I do. Hi, Jess. A few days before I get my period, my under eye gets puffy and I feel like I'm going to get a yeast infection. Wondering if this is excess estrogen and what I can do to help nourish. Thanks. Yeah, so a lot of people see correlation between their estrogen and yeast infections. I personally used to get this problem a lot. Progesterone completely fixed the issue for me personally, as well as just supporting my liver. So I do extra magnesium. I do 2 carrots, so I'll do like extra carrots, and then I am really good about getting. I do like my liquid multi that's in fully nourished, but I like to really specifically focus on nettle tea with some cranberry and some chlorophyll. So that's kind of what I do, and it really helped. But that's interesting that you said that, because I used to get like very similar symptoms. All right, guys, I'm gonna cut this off at the 2-hour mark, so about 10 minutes. I'm hoping that I can get through all your guys' questions. Let's see. Any suggestions for gastritis? I am like more like, just when people say like I have gastritis, I'm always just like, why do you have gastritis? Like, what's driving the issues? Like, is it stress? Because like the body, I feel like it's just such a general term for gut, like the gut's irritated and the gut's inflamed. So what's driving that? Like, what's building up to get us to that point? Like, are we eating super gut irritating foods? Like, do we have low stomach acid? Do we need digestive enzymes? Are we super stressed out? Like, there are so many factors. And so I would be looking at more of the why behind it. And I, of course, like once you have it, you're just kind of like, I just need help. And I would be looking at things that soothe the digestive tract, things like gelatin and stuff like that. Is there a protein powder you would recommend? Thanks. Protein powders are very like contextual, because some people just can't do protein powders at all. Some people are fine with casein. Some people are fine with whey. But I just like to look for something that's very, very clean and is only one ingredient. I like the brand Naked, like Naked casein can be good. J-Rob whey, like a lot of people are okay with that. Like some type of very high quality, clean whey for some people is okay. Paleo Valley's bone broth protein is okay for some people, but again, like, it's just everyone's different. Some people, like, if I give just one protein powder recommendation, there's gonna be like 2 people that are like, oh, this is great, and like 3 people that are like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. So I think it just depends on the person. Your top tips to improve bile flow besides eating healthy fats. I really like digestive bitters. Like, I like to really use Urban Moonshine. Dandelion tea can be very helpful. Castor oil packs, coffee enemas, if that's something that people, some people do them. Some people say like, oh my gosh, they're so dangerous. So I'm hesitant to recommend them. I just like to like bring them up. I really like them, but everyone's a little different. Anything that has beets, so like beet juice or shredding beets, ginger. So I like to like shred some ginger in the raw carrot salad. And then anything bitter. So like I already mentioned digestive bitters, but also just like anything bitter, like bitter greens, like endive or arugula, those types of things can help stimulate bile flow. Sorry, I meant to ask, what will show up on the GI map? Yeah, you can actually look at a sample report on Diagnostic Solutions website if you really want to see everything, but everything from like really intense pathogens to a lot of opportunistic bacteria. It does test for fungus, like specifically Candida albicans. It tests for parasites, like both protozoal and worm parasites. It also tests for beta-glucuronidase, which is helpful. It tests, like if you do a zonulin add-on, it can test for that. It tests like elastase, which is like shows your overall digestive capacity, like enzymes, bioflow, that kind of stuff. It tests your like immune function in the gut. So it has a lot of different, it's a very like versatile test that tests a lot of things. By no means is it going to test everything, because no gut test is perfect, but I really do like the GI map. When you mix the GI map with the organic acids test, like the Great Plains Laboratory one, you can get a really full, good picture of what's going on in the gut. Is it perfect? No, but it can be helpful information and helpful tools to work with. Thoughts on supplementing DHEA? Dosage is not enough to be turned into estrogen, according to naturopath, but I'm afraid it might be. Thoughts? I'd just be paying attention to it. I mean, I think that DHEA can be like a great support, especially if your doctor is indicating that it's a good option for you and you need it. But of course, you just want to pay attention, like pay attention to your cycle. That's probably the best indicator of if we have high estrogen or not. Like if our periods are heavier or clottier or crampier, or we're more moody, or maybe our ovulations are symptomatic, like that can be a sign like, hey, there's way more estrogen. Or we're gaining weight, that can be another. So just kind of paying attention to estrogeny symptoms. When would you recommend someone take aspirin as part of their healing protocol? I never recommend aspirin because I'm not a doctor. So I think everyone's different. They have to decide if aspirin is something they want to try and figure out if it's working for them. But I think it's pretty benign, honestly. So but it can be irritating to a gut that's already irritated. So that's for some people that can be like oh, my gut's irritated. Like it's not for me. How long should we take magnesium glycinate for? I usually take one right before bed. Thanks for answering all my questions. Some people will say like we need to take 5 times our body weight in magnesium. I personally like kind of fall somewhere in between. I like to take about like 400 to 500 milligrams per day, including like what I'm getting from my food. So I don't take it all in the form of magnesium glycinate. I personally do magnesium malate, magnesium glycinate, magnesium bicarbonate, and I also do magnesium like spray on my skin. So I like to varietize, but I take about 200 milligrams of glycinate before bed. A woman who eats carnivore had to get her gallbladder out after 5 years, 0 carb. Her doctor said it's common after several pregnancies. She says she feels healthy, but what in her diet caused it? Hypothyroidism is what usually messes with the gallbladder the most, as well as estrogen. So remember, the gallbladder requires thyroid hormone to function properly, and estrogen can really make that bile very sludgy. So I can't say for sure, but usually that's like the 2 things that come to my mind. And it's definitely the 2 things that come to my mind with that. With anyone that's like 0 carb, they have serious thyroid issues. And they also usually have estrogen because they're just not detoxing well. Like they're not clearing estrogen well. I had insomnia for a while, just started to sleep now, mostly through the night. When do you know you're ready to work out, build muscle? I don't think you ever really know. I don't think there's like a time where you're like, this is the time. But if you're still feeling like a lot of adrenaline issues, like you're not sleeping well, you're not feeling well throughout the day, you're feeling like your blood sugar is imbalanced, for example, like some people get lightheaded or irritated, or, they're getting blood sugar imbalance symptoms. Like that's not a time to be adding in extra depletion or extra stress. But if you're like, hey, I feel pretty good, like let's try adding a workout in. Try it and see how you feel, and don't make the decision in your head like, okay, I'm working out now. Work out a few times and see how you feel. If you're like, wow, I'm feeling really good after these workouts, like workouts are helping me feel better. Great, amazing, they're working for you. But some people are like, oh my gosh, I get super tired and I can't focus after a workout. Like, what do I do? And I'm like, don't push it. So I don't think there's like going to be a perfect time. Sometimes we just have to try it and see how we do. I got off birth control about 3 weeks ago, and I started having long-lasting panic attacks. Do you have any advice for balancing stress and changing hormones? Maybe read the Period Repair Manual by Dr. Lara Bryden if you haven't already, to kind of understand more about what's going on with hormones. And maybe what's it called? Beyond the Pill by Dr. Jolene Brighton might be another great resource to kind of learn. I think learning about where our hormones are at are the most helpful, because progesterone is the thing that helps balance moods out the most. And even though the pill doesn't have progesterone in it, the progestins in the pill can block those receptors. And so when we're without them, a lot of women will feel like their moods are out of control, or their emotions are out of control. Like they just feel very different. And it can have a lot to do with minerals. It can have a lot to do with hormones. So there are a lot of factors going on. The gut is affected. The liver is affected as we start to detox those hormones. So it kind of does require like a comprehensive look at what's going on in our bodies. You might end up enjoying like my mini course, Mend Your Cycle, just understanding about how the cycle is supposed to work. And then that's like kind of the goal post pill, is getting to that point where we are supporting estrogen, detoxification. We're supporting our production of progesterone through ovulation and nourishing our bodies very well, providing our bodies the nutrients it needs so that it can detoxify and the gut can work properly and all that good stuff. But those are two resources that I would definitely recommend. Thoughts on wild-caught salmon? Can be a great source of protein. I'm not like one to pound salmon, but I don't think like having it a couple times a week is a big problem. Yeah, thank you guys. Awesome. We got through all the questions. I love when we can get through all the questions because I feel like we like completed the live. But I thank you guys for always asking the best questions and being here and showing up. And I want to continue to keep doing these lives every Wednesday night. So I'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. PST. I love you guys and appreciate your guys's just your questions and being hungry to learn. And we'll keep doing this for a long time. All right, bye you guys.